Spring, 1989. Beijing's Tiananmen Square is the scene of an explosive confrontation between defiant pro-democracy demonstrators and China's communist government. Seen live on television around the world, the 7-week standoff comes to a head when the army is ordered to end the uprising. What began peacefully will end in a bloodbath and a new wave of oppression. Thousands will die, but defiance doesn't. Some refuse to yield. One young man stops a column of tanks and pleads with its commander to give us back our city. In the end, his heroism cannot stop the violence, but it earns him an honored place in the decade's pantheon of heroes. The uprising in Tiananmen Square is indelibly etched in our minds because around-the-clock news cameras allow us to watch it happen as it happens. Our emotions are challenged, and we begin to feel more like participants than observers. The lone youth, standing up against the full might of the world's largest nation, thwarting the forward motion of a line of armored tanks, fills us all with pride. For one glorious moment, he stands for each and every one of us who aspire to human dignity and freedom. There are other such stories in the 1980s, like the stories of Mikhail Gorbachev and Lech Walesa, the tearing down of the Berlin Wall and the spread of democracy across Eastern Europe. All stories to celebrate. The songs of Beatle John Lennon express his generation's longing for peace and love. When the Beatles break up in 1970, relinquishing their hysterical celebrity, Lennon and his wife Yoko move from London to New York. A son, Sean, is born in 1975 and is showered with love by both parents. The child seems to tame Lennon's restless spirit, helps curb his iconoclastic exhibitionism, and cements his relationship with Yoko. On December the 8th, 1980, the gentle apostle of peace is murdered by a deranged fan in front of his Manhattan apartment building. He is 40 years old. The dream is over, John Lennon once wrote, but for millions of fans who now mourn his death, the dream is not over. For them, it lives on in his words and music and in his voice, which even a bullet cannot silence.
Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer.
He said he wasn't the first to say, imagine no countries, or give peace a chance. But he believed it was his job as an artist to carry the torch, like an Olympic torch, he said, passing it from hand to hand, to each other, to each country, to each generation. When he's killed on the street outside his New York City apartment building, John Lennon passes that torch to millions of people around the globe. He has devoted his music to the struggle against violence, and still he dies a violent death. The man who was considered persona non grata by most governments is mourned even by heads of state. The grief worldwide is palpable. A Beatle, perhaps the Beatle, is gone. The 80s have begun. The sound of gunshots is heard again in 1981 when Ronald Reagan has a brush with death. Scarcely 2 months after his inauguration, the president is shot by a would-be assassin. 3 others are wounded, including the president's press secretary, James Brady. Reagan comes through an emergency operation with a smile. Before undergoing surgery, he quips, "I hope you doctors are Republicans." It's this buoyant optimism that shields the president against adversity and endears him to a large segment of the population. The nation responds to that optimism on July 4th, 1986, with a giant and spectacular party celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Statue of Liberty. There are other sights and sounds in the 80s. The artist, still known as Prince, says it all when he sings "Let's Go Crazy." There's virtual reality and Pac-Man. There's the computer craze and breakdancing. The world goes crazy chasing Cabbage Patch dolls, trying to meet the challenge of Rubik's Cubes. Big is in during the early 80s, especially on Wall Street, where profits go higher and higher. A movie captures the spirit of the times.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works. Greed in all of its forms. Greed for life, for money, for love, knowledge, has marked the upward surge of mankind, and greed, you mark my words, will not only save Teldar Paper, but that other malfunctioning corporation called the USA.
Reagan's dogged conservatism finds a political cellmate in Britain's Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher. In 1982, when Argentina reclaims the Falkland Islands from England, she goes to war. The battles take place in the South Atlantic, on and around the tiny islands of the Falklands. The British lose 4 warships, but on land, their highly mobile forces overwhelm the demoralized Argentinians. The brief war over, the Falklanders resume their placid coexistence with the sheep that outnumber them. On the Marxist-controlled Caribbean island of Grenada, Ronald Reagan fights a little war of his own. He sends the troops in, he says, to rescue several hundred American medical students, not to overthrow the government. The students are evacuated, and the president proclaims, "We got there just in time." In the same year, 1983, Reagan sends Marines into Lebanon, hoping to end an ongoing war between Muslims and Christians. Dispatched to prevent violence, the Marines soon become its victims. An explosive-filled truck crashes into their compound, killing over 200 of them. Muslim extremists take credit for the slaughter.
When our citizens are abused or attacked anywhere in the world on the direct orders of a hostile regime, we will respond so long as I'm in this Oval Office.
When terrorists attack American GIs in a West German disco, the president takes action. On April 14, 1986, he orders a surprise attack against Libya's strongman, Muammar Gaddafi. Branded the mad dog of the Middle East, Gaddafi denies complicity in the attack. In his denial lurks a threat of reprisal. 32 months later, that reprisal is delivered. In December 1988, in a plane like this one, Pan Am Flight 103 leaves London for New York. 256 people, mostly Americans, are aboard. A bomb explodes in midair. The 747 crashes into the small Scottish village of Lockerbie. Everyone on board and 11 townspeople are killed. The perpetrators are identified. Both are Libyan agents. American foreign policy in the 1980s is equally obsessed with the civil war in Nicaragua, where the pro-Marxist Sandinista government is under attack by right-wing insurgents called Contras. Reagan makes no secret of his support for the Contras, but some of the public and Congress oppose providing military aid to them. The president looks the other way when his security advisors hatch a bizarre plot involving America's sworn enemy, Iran. Iran is engaged in a brutal war with neighboring Iraq. It agrees to help free American hostages in Lebanon in exchange for the right to buy arms to be used against Saddam Hussein. The profits are turned over to the Contras to purchase guns. President Reagan denies the operation, but it is eventually exposed. During the Iran-Contra hearings, one of the key conspirators, Marine Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, refuses to implicate his commander-in-chief.
I never personally discussed the use of the residuals or profits from the sale of U.S. weapons to Iran for the purpose of supporting the Nicaraguan resistance with the president. I never raised it with him, and he never raised it with me.
A few months ago, I told the American people I did not trade arms for hostages. My heart and my best intentions still tell me that's true, but the facts and the evidence tell me it is not.
At the Geneva summit in 1985, the president meets the Soviet Union's new leader, Mikhail Gorbachev. Despite differences in age and ideology, the two men respond well to one another. Remarkably, they go off by themselves to privately explore ways of easing superpower tensions.
We understand each other better, and that's a key to peace. I gained a better perspective. I feel he did too.
Later, in 1987, the two leaders sign the first nuclear disarmament treaty. The dismantling of their arsenals is limited, but it is a hopeful sign. Reagan decides to push for more in Berlin, in the shadow of communism's most despised symbol.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
It is both a ringing challenge and a prophetic proclamation. July 29th, 1981, St. Paul's Cathedral in London. It is the wedding of the century. The beautiful young aristocrat, Lady Diana Spencer, marries Charles, Prince of Wales, heir to the British throne. The world is enthralled and mesmerized by what seems to be a match made in storybook heaven. 750 million people around the world watch the 32-year-old Prince of Wales take the 19-year-old kindergarten teacher as his wife and future queen. It is an opulent and grand event. The bride wears a resplendent gown of taffeta and old lace with a 25-foot train and a veil embroidered with 10,000 mother-of-pearl sequins. After the wedding ceremony and before the young couple ride back to Buckingham Palace through streets lined with 1 million well-wishers, the Archbishop of Canterbury says, "Here is the stuff of which fairy tales are made." But not all fairy tales have happy endings. From boyhood on, Charles is trained to be aloof, as befits a future king. He's an avid polo player who loves opera and is a student of architecture. Diana is a child of rock and roll, enjoys dancing and nightclubbing.
I'm amazed that she's been brave enough to take me on. And I suppose in love.
Of course.
Whatever in love means.
In their public appearances, they seem happy. Privately, the marriage is strained by differences in age and temperament, a situation not helped by the media's constant prying.
The pressure on us both as a couple with the media was phenomenal, because my husband and I, we were told when we got engaged that the media would go quietly, and it didn't. And then when we were married, they said it would go quietly, and it didn't. And then it started to focus very much on me.
Media attention doesn't divert Diana from her roles as princess and as wife and mother until she discovers Charles is continuing an affair with his longtime mistress, Camilla Parker Bowles.
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
Diana's unhappiness expresses itself in bouts of bulimia and extramarital affairs of her own. As the marriage flounders, it is no longer possible for Diana to put on a happy face. Increasingly, she loses herself in her work. As the 80s end, she is deeply involved in humanitarian causes.
AIDS has raised some enormous emotional, moral, and spiritual issues that transcend the physical disease. The vicious circle of fear, prejudice, and ignorance has increased the spread of AIDS to an alarming level.
In America, AIDS is at first mistakenly identified as a homosexual disease, but doctors soon learn it can affect anyone. Transmission comes through the bloodstream, through sexual contact, transfusion, or intravenous needles. When movie star Rock Hudson dies of the disease, the public's awareness is heightened. The plight of Ryan White, infected by a contaminated blood transfusion, also shocks the nation. Ryan has to fight to stay in school, despite evidence that AIDS isn't transmitted through casual contact. He is only 13 when he dies. With some 30 million people infected by the HIV virus, and with an estimated 6.5 million dead by 1996, hope is finally offered by a team of virologists headed up by Dr. David Ho. Dr. Ho creates what is called a therapeutic cocktail of protease inhibitors. He has not offered a cure for AIDS, but Dr. Ho's research holds out hope that AIDS is not invincible. One of the barriers to funding AIDS research is that of intolerance. The Academy Award-winning film Chariots of Fire eloquently addresses intolerance of another kind. Its compassionate message is also inescapable. It is the same as the message of the decade's biggest movie, E.T., having respect for all beings.
I'm not coming out there until your eyes are closed.
Okay, they're closed. I'm just gonna kill you.
Okay, swear it one more time. I have
Absolute power. Yes.
Elliot, look what I made for you. In the closet, fast.
This simple, touching story is a beacon for the 80s.
What happened in here?
President Ferdinand Marcos has ruled the Philippines since 1965. With his flamboyant wife, Imelda, Marcos's corrupt regime has brought the island nation to ruin. Later, it is Imelda's shoe collection that becomes a symbol for their wasteful extravagance. In 1983, the exiled opposition leader, Benigno Aquino, returns to Manila. He is gunned down at the airport before he can challenge Marcos. His widow, Cory, fights on.
I am for a non-violent and peaceful protest movement. Maraming salamat po.
In an embattled election, she wins the presidency, driving Marcos into exile.
Kung ano linalaman ng aking puso.
Aquino fights off communist insurrections and attempted coups, keeping the Philippines on its democratic course. She is only one of many women donning the mantle of leadership in the 1980s. Another is Benazir Bhutto, the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Her image is later tarnished by charges of corruption. She is, however, the first Prime Minister to give birth while in office. Indira Gandhi is in her fourth term as Prime Minister of India. After using force to put down a rebellion by militant Sikhs, she is assassinated. And in the West, there's Margaret Thatcher, now in her third term. Women are also taking their place in America's space program. Astronaut Sally Ride, a PhD in physics, is aboard Space Shuttle Challenger on 2 successful missions. In 1985, a 37-year-old New Hampshire schoolteacher, Krista McAuliffe, wins a national competition to become the first private citizen to fly in space.
I don't think any teacher has ever been more ready to have 2 lessons in my life. I've been preparing these since September, and I just hope everybody tunes in on day 4 now to watch the teacher teaching from space.
The takeoff seems flawless.
Throttle down to 65%.
No one at NASA expects trouble. Then, less than 2 minutes after liftoff, the unexpected happens.
Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction. We have no downlink.
They came from all parts of this great country. They were so different, yet in their mission, their quest, they held so much in common. We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them, as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye, and slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God.
The death of Krista McAuliffe, the first private citizen to fly on a shuttle mission, and her 6 crewmates, reminds us once again that for all of our scientific wizardry, no one has yet devised an accident-proof mechanism that can grant us immunity from human error or technological failure. Similarly, we learn time and time again that no one will ever be able to guarantee the safety of a public figure, be it Pope, President, or Prime Minister, as long as political assassins and armed madmen walk among us. 1981, a right-wing putsch threatens Spain's fledgling democracy. Renegade security police invade parliament taking hostages. They try to incite a national uprising against Spain's liberal government. Instead, they come up against King Juan Carlos, who mobilizes the nation against the rebels. The coup is crushed. Free elections are held. The Spanish people's commitment to democracy earns them the admiration of the world and the return of a national treasure, Picasso's Guernica. When Picasso created Guernica at the height of the Spanish Civil War, he said it would be returned to Spain only when that country was a democracy. It is now moved from New York's Museum of Modern Art to its rightful home in Madrid. Again in 1981, a madman wreaks havoc. Pope John Paul II is shot in St. Peter's Square in Rome. The 60-year-old pontiff survives, but only after undergoing over 5 hours of surgery. His assailant, a Turkish ex-convict, implicates the Soviet Union in the plot to kill the Pope. Later, John Paul II visits his would-be assassin in prison. He forgives him. In 1983, the Pope returns to his native Poland Watching on television is Polish dissident Lech Walesa. Together, they will play a role in Poland's future. In 1984, Los Angeles plays host to the 23rd Summer Olympic Games of the modern era. The Games celebrate sportsmanship in the tradition of the first Olympics held in Greece in 776 BC. But for the second time in the 80s, the Games yield to the pressures of the Cold War. As the nations march by, the Soviet Union and its satellite countries are missing. Payback for America's boycott of the 1980 Olympic Games in Moscow. As the Olympic torch is carried into Los Angeles' historic Coliseum, site of the 1932 Games, Rafer Johnson, a past gold medal decathlon champion, has the honor of igniting the Olympic flame. Among the gold medal winners are America's Florence Griffith Joyner, track and field champ Carl Lewis, and gymnast Mary Lou Retton. The Cold War notwithstanding, the 1984 Olympics demonstrates that the spirit of unity is alive in the world. In a decade sometimes defined by its cynicism, the spirit of sharing is often overlooked. In music, as in sports, that spirit dominates the 80s. British rock musician Bob Geldof is the inspiration for a series of concerts and recordings that raise money to relieve the suffering of thousands of starving Africans, victims of a prolonged drought in Ethiopia. First, there is Geldof's Do They Know It's Christmas? Then, We Are the World.
There comes a time when we heed a certain call, when the world must come together as one. There are people dying. Oh, and it's time to lend a hand to life, the greatest gift of all. We are the world. We are the children. We are the ones who make a brighter day. So let's start giving.
Written by Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson, We Are the World becomes an anthem for the 80s, a moving test of human compassion and an affirmation of the healing power of music. Bob Geldof's Live Aid concerts are also part of the massive relief effort.
Wembley, will you please welcome America to Live Aid Day? Hello, America. Welcome to the world.
Good morning, children of the 80s, says singer Joan Baez as she welcomes the 90,000 Americans gathered for the Live Aid concert in Philadelphia. This is your Woodstock, and it's long overdue. She and scores of other pop and rock stars not only entertain, they inspire their audiences on both sides of the Atlantic. For a few brief shining moments, the musicians of the 80s give a new look to a decade that is quickly earning a reputation for self-absorption and self-concern. Bob Geldof's Global Jukebox raises more than $50 million for African famine relief. Africa suddenly becomes a continent the rest of the world is thinking about. In South Africa, the blacks are demanding that the world pay attention. They shout, "Give us our freedom, give us our dignity, give us our homeland." Their cries have fallen on deaf ears since 1948, when apartheid became law. The strict separation of the races is designed to keep blacks in poverty and subservience. In March of 1960, when police killed 67 in the black township of Sharpeville, there was a change in Nelson Mandela's non-violent movement.
There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and nonviolence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks on an unarmed and defenseless people.
In 1964, Mandela was convicted of sabotage and treason and sentenced to life imprisonment. In the following years, the battle for freedom continued. In 1976, hundreds of demonstrators, mostly children, were killed in Soweto, protesting the government's decision to force the teaching of Afrikaans in black schools. Afrikaans is a dialect spoken by South Africa's Dutch-descended whites. Blacks regard it as the language of oppression. As the shocking documentation of the whites' brutal enforcement of apartheid became evident, many in the West demanded that their governments and the United Nations take action. Economic sanctions followed. South Africa's white leaders became social pariahs. But Prime Minister P.W. Botha arrogantly made clear his intentions in a speech to Parliament.
I've been lenient and patient. Don't push us too far. Don't push us too far.
With Mandela in prison, his wife, Winnie, kept his message of freedom alive. Advocates of a growing nonviolence movement find a compelling spokesman in Archbishop Desmond Tutu, head of South Africa's Anglican Church and a Nobel Peace Prize winner.
The world acknowledges us as working for justice, for compassion, for love, for togetherness, for reconciliation.
Tutu's stature allows him to take his demands directly to the new Prime Minister, F.W. de Klerk.
We need Nelson Mandela. That is our leader. That is our leader. Release our leader. Release our leader.
Throughout the 80s, international pressure coupled with the long-standing economic boycott makes it almost certain that something will happen, and soon. Ultimately, the moment comes in the year after this decade ends. After 27 years in prison, Mandela is free. He calls upon the people to work with him to build a greater South Africa.
In Africa, yes.
1980, an unemployed electrician named Lech Walesa leads a strike against Poland's communist government. Support for the movement, which calls itself Solidarity, spreads from the Gdansk shipyards across Poland. Hundreds of thousands join in the outcry for decent wages and equitable food distribution. As Solidarity's chief negotiator, Walesa succeeds in extracting important concessions from the government, consolidating his position as Poland's man of the hour. Solidarity's ranks become 10 million strong. Under duress from the Soviets, Poland's military government declares martial law. Solidarity demonstrations are outlawed. dissension is met by force. Walesa is taken into custody and held, first in prison, then under house arrest, for 11 months. During his internment, he's named Time magazine's Man of the Year. In 1983, he is awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, an event he is forbidden to attend. Reveling in the cheers of his followers, Walesa knows that history is moving in his favor. A stocky, unemployed electrician once said, "I'm not interested in politics. I'm a union man." But the man with the walrus mustache and the big grin is a politician. 10 years after he climbs over the Lenin shipyard walls to help organize the workers there, Lech Walesa becomes the first democratically elected president in Poland since the end of World War II. Solidarity's successful battle for free elections is among the first signs that the Soviet Union's control over its monolithic Eastern European empire is weakening. 1985. Russia struts its military might in Red Square. But the grim reality of its fading power is reflected in the face of Mikhail Gorbachev. From his predecessors, Gorbachev inherits a host of seemingly insurmountable problems. In Afghanistan, 120,000 Russian troops are pinned down in a war with Islamic rebels. The rebels are skilled mountain fighters aiming to overthrow Afghanistan's Marxist government. As the war grinds on in futility, morale is low, mutiny common. The war claims 16,000 casualties and is bitterly dubbed Russia's Vietnam. In 1989, 10 years after Russia's intervention, Gorbachev pulls the last troops out of Afghanistan. On the domestic front, he faces a failing economy. He is further compromised by his mishandling of the nuclear disaster at Chernobyl. An explosion sets off fires that spread outside the reactor, releasing dangerous levels of radiation into the atmosphere. The Soviets try to hush up the incident, downplaying the crisis. Gorbachev's reputation for openness suffers. Though beset with problems at home, Gorbachev is admired in the West as a proponent of peace. Affectionately known as Gorby, the vigorous Soviet premier is a startling contrast to his dogmatic predecessors. His vision is to rebuild the Soviet Union along more democratic lines. Gorbachev's openness manifests itself again when Americans and Russians are permitted to join in a peace march from Leningrad to Moscow. It culminates in the Soviet Union's first outdoor rock concert featuring Russian and American artists. One such artist is Bonnie Raitt.
This very fact is a miracle, I think. A miracle, and that's a great idea. It was a great idea to make this concert here. It's impossible, and that's great.
It is Gorbachev's relationship with Ronald Reagan that partly defines his place in history. He wins the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts to negotiate an end to 40 years of nuclear brinksmanship. In Moscow, the president who once called the USSR an evil empire openly displays affection for its current emperor. With Reagan's successor, George Bush, Gorbachev continues the rapprochement. But international success doesn't shield him from criticism at home. He is the first Soviet premier to endure criticism and insults in parliament. Hardline communists challenge his economic reforms. They also oppose him when he renounces the right to intervene militarily in satellite countries' domestic disputes. Poland is first. Then other countries in the Eastern Bloc follow, breaking free of the dictatorships that have kept them economically backward. Gorbachev cannot hold back what he has set in motion. The hunger for democracy and its largesse is too great. The Soviet Union can only look on as its empire crumbles. Unregenerate Stalinists and fanatic nationalists will later hold Gorbachev responsible. By the end of 1989, Hungary is the first to open its borders to the West, giving some refugees their first breath of freedom.
Das ist einfach Wahnsinn. Wir haben es geschafft.
Then, on November the 10th, the Berlin Wall itself cracks wide open. Festive crowds pour into the West. They come to celebrate and to participate in the tearing down of the Cold War's most despised symbol. East Germans and West Germans are united for the first time in 28 years. The collapse of the Berlin Wall is an exhilarating finale to a decade marked by deep longings for freedom. A new vocabulary takes hold in the 1980s. Words like nanosecond, modem, fiber optics, and information superhighway become part of our everyday language. The electronic revolution, proceeding at a dizzying pace since World War II, now embraces us all. Giant computers, which once filled whole rooms, can now be worn on our wrists. Chips, which cost $100 apiece and held only 50 transistors in the 1970s, in the 80s, cost $5 and hold 50,000 transistors. But beyond computing, beyond storing information, there is another giant leap forward in the late 80s. It is the dramatic shift in the electronic revolution to communications. Satellites, cellular broadcast pathways, fax machines, and email now connect us all. The global village is an electronic one. One journalist writes that television, fax machines, and computers are co-conspirators in the dramas played out at the Berlin Wall. Through them, information and dreams are instantly communicated. With them, the power of an idea cannot long be contained.
Imagine all the people sharing all the world.
John Lennon, who died at the beginning of this decade, gives it its closing lines. As the borders open, it's not hard to imagine there's no countries.
The world will be as one.
It is one of the great celebrations of the century. It is, after all, the end of the Cold War. And that is something to celebrate.